Hey guys, it's Brian from the Daily AI Show, and in this Saturday's edition of an AI conundrum, we have a really good one that's about reality and illusion. So here's the conundrum. If AI can generate realities that feel as genuine as life itself, is there a meaningful distinction between reality and illusion? Could we come to value experiences in an AI generated reality equally significant as our real life experiences? Or does that blur the line between true experiences and simulation beyond recovery? So, what's interesting about this one, as we've done for the last two Saturdays, this is a AI generated podcast. I took the conundrum, I put it through a simple prompt in Perplexity Deep Research that gave me basically a debate on both sides of it. I used that information, I put it into Google Notebook LM, and then we created the AI podcast from there. And that's what you're about to hear is that discussion. Now, what's interesting about this is you're listening to a fully AI generated conversation where they're debating the idea of not being able to tell the truth between AI and reality in the future. So enjoy this very meta conversation. And I hope you like it.
Okay, so this whole AI thing has really been messing with my head lately.
Mm.
Just like how it's blurring the lines between what's real and what's like simulated. Have you ever like found yourself questioning if what you're experiencing is actually authentic? I mean, we've got this source, AI, reality, and the crossroads of illusion, and it just gets so deep into how AI is like literally changing what real even means. Like we're talking AI recreating historical worlds, even bringing back loved ones through deepfakes. And the implications are huge because this isn't just some sci-fi movie plot anymore.
Yeah, it's wild, right? What I think is so fascinating about this source is that it tackles this idea head on. Like, we're moving into this era where AI experiences are becoming so convincing that they're challenging our very definition of like what reality even
Yeah,
is.
and that's what I find so mind-blowing. The source talks about this AI-generated Parisian cafe that was so realistic. Like people swore they could smell the coffee and croissants, but it was all a simulation. So if our
Hmm.
senses can be fooled that easily, how do we even know what's real anymore?
Right. That's where this concept of subjective perception comes, in which the source explains really well. It's this idea that our brains aren't just recording devices, they're constantly interpreting and filtering information. And all based on our memories, emotions, biases, all that.
So two people could like walk through that AI cafe and have totally different experiences,
Yeah.
even though it's the same simulation.
Exactly. And if the AI can trigger the same emotional and sensory responses as a real experience, does it really matter if it's happening in a computer program?
Hmm. I don't know, but isn't there a difference between like experiencing something through a computer and actually being there? Like I might be able to explore ancient Rome through a VR headset, but I'm not actually breathing the air, feeling the cobblestones under my feet.
That's a great point, and it gets to the heart of what makes reality so complex. You know, the source even brings up things like the Turing test and Nick Bostrom's simulation argument, which basically boil down to this idea. If we can't tell the difference between a simulated experience and a real one, does it even matter? Like, how do we define intelligence, consciousness, even reality itself?
Okay, my brain is definitely doing backflips right now.
Yeah.
So on one hand, we've got this mind-bending question of whether AI can truly replicate reality. But the source doesn't just stop there. It goes on to argue that maybe, just maybe, these AI-generated experiences could actually be a good thing, this whole case for equivalence idea.
Yeah.
So,
And this is where things get really interesting because the source points out that AI could actually democratize experiences in a way we've never seen before. Imagine a student who can't afford to travel being able to explore ancient Rome through a multisensory AI simulation, or someone with a disability being able to climb Mount Everest using a neural interface.
hmm, that's a really interesting point about AI leveling the playing field. But couldn't it also create a new kind of divide? Like, what if only some people can afford the hyper-realistic, fully immersive AI experiences, while others are stuck with a more basic, less convincing version of reality?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question. And it highlights the potential for both utopian and dystopian outcomes. The source also talks about how AI simulations could help policymakers understand complex issues like climate change in a much deeper way. Instead of just looking at data points, they could actually experience the potential consequences of their decisions.
Oh, wow. So instead of just reading a report about rising sea levels, they can actually stand on a virtual beach and watch the water engulf a city. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But does that mean a simulated experience can truly replace genuine understanding?
That's one of the big philosophical questions this source is wrestling with. And it goes even further exploring this idea of human-computer symbiosis. Like, what if we reach a point where AI isn't just creating simulations, but actually merging with our minds through technologies like Neuralink?
Okay, now we're getting into some serious sci-fi territory. But it does make you wonder, aren't we already kind of living in curated realities, even without AI? I mean, social media algorithms, personalized news feeds.
That's a very astute observation. The source argues that AI might simply be amplifying a trend that's already in motion. We've always been shaping and filtering our experiences through different lenses.
So this case for equivalence isn't saying AI-generated realities are inherently good or bad. It's more about recognizing the potential and the risks and figuring out how to navigate this uncharted territory thoughtfully. But I have a feeling this isn't the whole story, right? There must be some pretty strong arguments against equating AI simulations with real-world experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the source doesn't shy away from the potential downsides, like what it calls the case against equivalence. And one of the biggest concerns it raises is this whole idea of epistemic erosion.
Okay, break that down for me. Epistemic sounds kind of intense.
It is, in a way. It refers to the erosion of trust in shared reality. Think about it, if we're constantly bombarded with AI-generated content that's like indistinguishable from the real thing, how do we even know what to believe anymore?
Right. It's like that whole deep fake dilemma everyone's talking about. You see a video of a politician saying something outrageous, but it turns out it's completely fabricated.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're questioning everything you see and hear.
Exactly. And that erosion of trust can have like a ripple effect throughout society. Think about the justice system, for example. What happens when deepfakes become admissible evidence in court? Or when AI-generated news articles are used to manipulate public opinion?
Yeah, it's like the whole foundation of our society is built on this shared understanding of what's true and what's not. If that starts to crumble, where does that leave us?
That's the scary part. The source argues that it could lead to widespread apathy, paranoia, even the breakdown of like democratic systems. And it's not just about the big picture stuff, it can impact our personal lives too.
Like,
Well, imagine you get a heartfelt message from a loved one who passed away, but it turns out it was generated by an AI that analyzed their past communications. On one hand, it's a beautiful way to keep their memory alive. But on the other hand, is it a genuine connection or just a sophisticated illusion? Does it cheapen the real relationship you had?
wow, that's a really tough one. It makes you question what authenticity even means in a world where AI can mimic human emotions so convincingly.
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of like the Chinese room argument? Where a computer can seem like it understands something, but it's really just manipulating symbols?
You're exactly right to connect those ideas. The source brings up the Chinese room as a way to illustrate the potential gap between AI's ability to mimic human behavior and its actual capacity for understanding. Like, you could have an AI therapist that listens to your problems and offers seemingly insightful advice, but does it truly empathize with your pain? Or is it just following a complex set of algorithms?
I mean, if it helps me feel better, does it really matter if the AI truly gets me? Isn't the outcome what counts?
That's a valid question, and it gets to the heart of this debate. The source points out that even if an AI can provide practical benefits, there's something inherently human about those genuine connections, those shared moments of vulnerability and understanding. And relying too heavily on AI simulations could make us lose sight of that.
Yeah, it's like the difference between having a deep conversation with a close friend and just scrolling through social media for hours. You might get a temporary hit of dopamine from the likes and comments, but it's not the same as that real human connection.
Exactly. And that brings us to another potential downside the source explores: the loss of authentic agency.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. How could AI make us less ourselves?
Well, the source draws on the work of philosopher Martin Heidegger here. He talked about how technology can reduce reality to standing reserve, where everything becomes a resource to be exploited and controlled. And the concern is that AI could take this even further by creating these incredibly personalized, on-demand experiences that cater to our every whim.
So instead of embracing the messiness and unpredictability of real life, we just retreat into these perfectly curated AI simulations where everything goes our way. And we never have to face any real challenges.
That's the danger. It's like choosing to live in a carefully constructed echo chamber, where our beliefs are never challenged, our comfort zones are never breached, and our sense of agency is slowly eroded.
Right. It's like we're trading the richness and complexity of real life for a kind of sterile, predictable existence.
But isn't that a bit ironic? I mean, one of the promises of AI is that it can expand our horizons and give us access to experiences we could never have otherwise.
That's a great point. And it highlights the paradoxical nature of this whole dilemma.
Hmm.
AI has the potential to both liberate and limit us, depending on how we choose to use it. And that's why the source stresses the importance of being mindful and discerning. It's not about rejecting AI altogether. It's about being aware of the potential pitfalls and making conscious choices. So it's like a balancing act. We want to harness the power of AI without losing sight of what makes us human, those essential qualities of unpredictability, vulnerability, and surprise. But even if we manage to strike that balance, there's still the issue of bias, right?
You're absolutely right. And this is where things get even more complex. Because the source argues that if AI algorithms are trained on biased data sets, they can end up perpetuating those biases in the simulations they create.
Well, so instead of challenging our preconceived notions and expanding our worldviews,
Mm.
these AI simulations could actually reinforce existing inequalities and prejudices.
That's the concern. And it's not just a hypothetical problem. We're already seeing examples of AI systems exhibiting racial and gender biases simply because they were trained on data that reflected those biases.
So it's not enough to just create realistic AI simulations. We have to make sure those simulations are actually representing the world in a fair and accurate way.
Exactly. And that requires a lot of critical thinking and careful consideration. It's not about censoring AI or shutting down innovation. It's about being mindful of the potential consequences and working to mitigate those risks.
Okay, so things are getting pretty intense here. We've got this case against equivalence, arguing that AI simulations could erode our trust in reality, limit our agency, perpetuate biases. It's a lot to process. But I'm guessing the source doesn't just leave us hanging with all these potential downsides. There must be some solutions, right?
You're right, the source doesn't just lay out all the problems, it actually offers some potential solutions. And it starts with this idea of like establishing ethical guardrails for AI development.
Okay, so like kind of setting some ground rules to make sure AI is used responsibly. I'm all for that, but how do we actually make that happen? It all just seems so abstract.
It's a huge challenge for sure, but the source does like get into some specifics. For example, it talks about requiring transparency when it comes to AI generated content.
So like labeling AI-generated images or videos so we know they're not real, kind of like a warning simulation in progress sign.
Exactly. That way we're not constantly second guessing whether what we're seeing is authentic or manufactured. It helps us maintain a critical distance and make informed choices about what we consume.
Right, transparency makes total sense to me. What else is on the ethical guardrails checklist?
Another crucial point the source raises is the need to address bias in AI algorithms. If these systems are trained on biased data sets, they're just going to amplify those biases in the simulations they create.
Right, and then those bias simulations become part of our reality even if we don't realize it. It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. So a big part of this is being mindful of the data that's feeding these AI systems and ensuring it represents a diverse range of perspectives and experiences.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the human choices and intentions behind it.
Hmm.
But even if we get the ethics right, it still feels like a slippery slope. How do we prevent these AI simulations from completely taking over our lives?
Well, the source offers this really interesting concept called hybrid realities. It's not about replacing real-world experiences with AI, but rather finding ways to use AI to enhance those experiences.
So it's less about escaping into a virtual world and more about using AI to make the real world even more engaging and meaningful. I like that, but I'm having trouble picturing it. Got any examples?
Think about visiting a historical site and using an AI-powered augmented reality app to see what it looked like centuries ago, or using AI to personalize museum exhibits based on your individual interests.
Oh, those are great examples.
Yeah.
It's like using AI to add another layer of depth and understanding to our real-world experiences.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to history and art. Hybrid realities could revolutionize education, healthcare, even environmental conservation.
Okay, now I'm seeing the potential.
Mhm.
But I also wonder if this requires a pretty big shift in mindset. I mean, we're so used to thinking of the digital world as separate from the real world.
You're absolutely right. And that's why the source emphasizes the importance of what it calls philosophical literacy.
Right, that idea of giving people the tools to think critically about the nature of reality and how AI is changing our perceptions. But how do we actually foster this philosophical literacy? It's not like they teach you this stuff in school.
That's true. And it's why spaces like this are so important. Podcasts, documentaries, online forums, even just having conversations with friends and family about these issues can make a big difference.
So it's about bringing these big philosophical questions out of the ivory tower and into our everyday lives. I love that. But even with all these safeguards in place, ethical guidelines, hybrid realities, philosophical literacy, it still feels like a huge responsibility.
It is, but it's also an incredible opportunity because the future of AI and the future of reality itself is ultimately in our hands.
Wow, when you put it that way, it's both exciting and a little terrifying.
Exactly. But I think that's the beauty of it. We're not just passive observers, we're active participants in shaping this new reality. And that's a powerful thing.
Well said. So to wrap things up, what's the key takeaway from this deep dive? What's the one thing you want listeners to walk away with?
The source doesn't offer any easy answers, and that's okay. I think the most important thing is to keep asking questions, to stay curious, and to remember that reality isn't a fixed objective thing. It's constantly being shaped by our perceptions, our choices, and now our technologies.
So we're all co-creators of reality in a way.
Precisely. And that's a
Man,
powerful and humbling thought, because it means we have a responsibility to wield that power thoughtfully, ethically, and with a deep appreciation for what makes human experience so unique and precious.
I love that. It's like a call to action, an invitation to step into this new reality with both eyes open and a sense of wonder. This deep dive has been a wild ride, folks. It's definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you. Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.